All right. So here we are, another week, mid-May, halfway through Q2. Anybody have some good news to share?
I was hoping to have some good news, but buyer backed out, so we're back at square one. But I do have I think a pretty strong listing lead from the open house,
hmm
so we're gonna definitely following that one.
Yep. And you got a big list of people you got to follow up on too. So it'll be interesting
Yes,
how many of
that's
those pop up with something. So,
that that's my to-do list for today. Yes.
yep. Other good news, the brokerage, we just hired on two new agents. Chris Lee McLeod. Oh, I just lost it. I had it in front of me. Anyways, and Barbara Macias. She's going to potentially, I think, start in Phoenix, move to Tucson, or vice versa. We don't know yet. But her hope
Hmm.
is to work both cities and then eventually end up in one or the other. Barbara's got some experience with her. Chris, I think, is relatively new, only year in the business. So that makes 8 of us agents here plus myself. Growing and growing. Anybody else have any good news? Want to share?
I'll pass it on for Joanne. She passed her school test, so she's
Yep. I heard she's just waiting
she could
for
be number
the big
nine here
one.
before long.
Yep. Uh, oh, don't think there's anything else. So let me go into dive into the market then. Here we are at not on May 16th. Our active listings are up, which is kind of odd. And our purchases are going down. This is kind of what happens middle of Q2. It's supposed to go down a little bit, but in this crazy, insane multi-offer market, we actually have a few more days on market. So hopefully this is a good trend for the future. As you can see, our market index, thankfully, nothing's in the 6 or 7s and craziness. We're starting to drop down into 500s, Glendale being the highest one, and it's still under 6, which is good. And Tempe, surprisingly enough, dropped down to 325. They're always lower than everybody else, but that's kind of a major shift for them. Hopefully someday we'll get down the 2s. This week I have a bunch of stuff from Bruce, who presented through Cromford Report. He had a few things that everybody else doesn't have available, and one of the things he wanted to talk about was 1031 is on the chopping block in Biden's administration. They may be getting rid of this, so if you have investors, tell them now is the time to buy. They don't know when that might be signed into law, if ever, but still a looming threat over everything, and then being crazy, insane high prices. Time to sell would be now. Here's the profit market index as a future indicator of price. As we have always talked about, the indicator is about a 3-month tail or a trailing indicator of what the market's about to do. As you can see over here, as it climbs up, we still climb for a few more months after, and then it finally took the dip off the cliff. Over here in 2020, 21, we have us slightly starting to turn the corner. Most likely in the next 3 months, we will finally see a little bit downturn in demand, and hopefully our profit market index will start coming down a bit in something more normal. Based on price, monthly average sale price, still on an upward climb. Looks like it's climbing the cliff. The craziness, May of last year to this year, 42% increase in price per square foot. 42. That's not just double digits. That's like 40 times as much. You have that house for 300,000. Now it's 312. Sorry, my math's totally off. But get the picture. Can't do math this morning. I should have had more coffee. Sales per year by price point. This is kind of nice the way he broke it out in this little different graph that he has here. There's Butch Leiber. He's down there in the bottom. He has business coaching for, but he's also is Cromford master of all this data. Interestingly enough, sales per year at under 100,000. We used to have 1 out of 10 of those homes selling under 100,000. Now, less than 1 in 100. That's the biggest craziness. And then, of course, the 250 to 500,000 was maybe a core of the market. Now that's over half. Prices are shifting up into the higher price points. It's crazy what 7 years will do in this market and Greater Phoenix Metro. Oops. Our contract ratios, these are the ratios to how many things are active versus how much are going under contract and selling. Of course, this year was a record-breaking year, especially around April. We had an all-new high, 332. Um, Never even got that high back in 2012 when we had the crazy foreclosure rush. Trying to remember what this one was for. Oh yeah, owner occupied versus second home versus investors and iBuyers. This is just giving you a showing representation of how much that market share has been. This year is for, of course, for this one over here, Q1. Going back just a few years, iBuyers were taken off just a couple of years ago. They were over 5%. Now they're less than half that again. Q2, of course, when the pandemic happened, they were almost non-existent. The shift's still around owner occupies. They're still around the same. It's still in the low 70s ish. The interesting part is second homes have popped up again to 11% of buyers. So people looking for those nice little houses out in the outskirts of Phoenix, or just for having a place to snowbird. Flip investors on the rise, obviously, because we have soaring prices. Pretty easy to get into a home, turn it around for extra cash, and you're appreciating it 10 to 12% a year. Resale file difference, of course, it's not HDTV. You don't make that 78.5 on the split. There's your carrying cost, the cost for your acquisition and repairs, et cetera, et cetera. Flips are just ones that they consider are within 0 to 180 days after purchase. I don't know why they Zoom screwed up on these, but anyways, flip sales, where the flippers are going, where the renovations will be going in, and where the most of the appreciation will be happening. Of course, they follow those. Median gains, most of them are in Phoenix, Scottsdale, Mesa, kind of the places you kind of expected, Glendale, Chandler, Tempe. That's where the majority of them is. People are even starting to move out into the outskirts. Got some more activity in Maricopa, which is surprising. Buckeye, AJ, Sun City West, just to find the deals. iBuyers, we touched on just briefly just a second ago. Knock pretty much is out of the running anymore. They basically have moved over to become bridge lenders. And then Zillow, surprisingly enough, has dropped off the face of the map. Their activity's dropped almost half. Same with OfferPad, but Open Doors taking up all that slack. On rent or own, location is everything. Everybody was forgetting why he pulled this one up, but it's kind of interesting, just comparisons versus rent versus own. Switzerland, almost nobody owns. Here you have in U.S. where you got 60% still, which is still dropping a little bit. But crazy that, most of the European nations, they're all worse renters. Japan, I was surprised by how much people are owning, because it's crazy out there. 5 skills every entrepreneur needs to know. Communication, obviously, is huge. It's the biggest skill you're going to be using. Patience. Well, yeah, you got to have patience in this industry, especially if you're trying to go against multiple offers. Stress management. Your hours are crazy. They're all over the place. You have to always be on call. That adds a little extra stress. And then, of course, as you find out, when you get things under contract, they fall out. That is very stressful. Networking abilities. It's all about relationships. So the more people you know, the more people you can get connected with, the better you're going to do. Hiring abilities. I guess for other entrepreneurs, but not as big if you are a real estate agent, unless you start going into the brokerage side of it. This one was interesting. Market comparison for average days of vacancy. How many people are actually occupied in property complexes? Vacancy rates basically is the flip of that, and how many are prospective renters. Colorado Springs topping the charts. I wouldn't have guessed Colorado Springs. I would have guessed Denver. They're up there with us. We're ranked number 22, 39.5 score, and we have almost no vacancy, 3 or 4%, which is unheard of. 5 is supposed to be conservative. U-Haul, this is interesting. Where is all our inbound traffic coming from? From Arizona. And of course, California was number 1. That was obvious. That was like 40% right there. Out of everybody. Next 2 big, Texas and Colorado. Surprised by Colorado. And Nevada and Utah. Colorado's having a crazy storm that we're having with the seller's market as well. Maybe because they're getting, thinking it might be better out here. Highest paying jobs in Arizona. This one's kind of keep in mind if you're looking for high net worth individuals that you want to work with as buyers or sellers. Kind of pretty much most of them are obvious. You got your doctors, physicians, more doctors, dentists. chief executives, CEOs, and pilots. As Rob found out, they get good money. Um, residents' ability to pay rent during COVID. I'm able to continue paying my rent as usual. It's only 57%. I find that very odd that it's that low. All my tenants are paying. Most of the investors I talk to, the tenants are paying, but maybe we screen better. Who knows? Concerned about the future, still 20%. Able to pay my rent in full for at least 1 month and have to catch up, another 12%. There is financial, oh, God, can't talk today. There is financing available for renters, and even the landlords can initiate that if the tenants don't do it themselves, which most of them weren't. This one was a very, very interesting. This is the percentage of who's going to be the renter in the home. Only one person, couples without kids, couples with kids. Single family homes, you think that would be the number one place that people with kids go for? Only 15%. Most of them are couples without kids, multi-generational, or just a single person. You'd think those happen in multifamily or apartments, but oddly enough, single families. New housing starts in the United States. Interesting enough, we are up higher than we used to be. 2009 is, of course, our low. We're kind of getting back up to those 2005 levels of building, but it's still slow. This is seasonally adjusted, of course. And then that's all the ones for Bruce. Just going to top off things. Here for Maricopa, for everything under 10,000 square feet, more conditions. Accepted contracts are dipping slightly, so we're going to see a little less being accepted, even though we're getting more inventory, so we're getting a little increase. Our median days on market, days, less than a week, 6 days. And then, of course, our price per square foot still on the upward swing. We're around 255, which is crazy considering June of 2020 even was around 191, not even up to 200. Of course, last thing, market cap up, 26% median sales price increase. Crazy. Sales are way down, contracts are way up for the month. This will probably be updated again, of course, back in June. But just as a recap of what's going on, there went the cliff of months of supply. May of 2021 versus last year. Any questions on the market?
So way back at the beginning, one of the first slides you showed was the comfort index starting to go down.
Yes.
Is that the leading indicator, the 3-month indicator? Then when you compare that with some of the ones that you were just doing at the end, yeah, right there.
This is where the tail happens. Look over here when 2005 happened. We had crazy, crazy, crazy increase to a peak, and then it dropped. Things still kept selling. Demand still kept going up for about 3 months, and then it started going down. So we see it just trailing behind it. So now that we see that things are tapering off, we expect this to keep going up a little bit for the next 3 months, and then for it to start to fall.
Okay. So that 24 well, I'm thinking about for my my listing, the over a million, to be able to say to them, because they're wanting to list in the fall, and to say, okay,
if they list in the fall, you can tell them the 3-month indicator shows that the market is not going to hold.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. That's what I was
very dramatically. And summer coming up, summer's the dead season. It'll always drop anyways. But if it's 3 months out, that means right around fall is when the real cliff is going to happen, potentially. We don't know. 3 months from now, it could take off again. Something crazy could happen with the market. We have inflation could become a non-issue. We could have a flood of low interest rates again, or the opposite could happen. Could have flood of homes come on the market, forbearance wearing off. We could have inflation going crazy high. We could have interest rates go crazy high, and all of a sudden, market may drop out. Nobody knows. Nobody has a crystal ball, but the leading indicator shows we're headed towards the cliff. It should level out if we're going to be all good and happy. Like, look over here, right around, let's see, basically anywhere from 2016 to 2018, we were pretty much a level market. It just didn't move, didn't move. Now we're showing a very steep downcline. And the only steep downcline we've ever saw was, of course, pandemic lockdown and bring up 2005.
Yeah.
They're like, oh,
Okay. So I may push them to think maybe a little bit sooner than the fall.
yes. I would say like yesterday,
Yeah.
if they can.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the market? All right. I will kick off the presentation. So, oops, wrong slide to start with. All right. So, we're going to talk about negotiating in a seller's market. So, whoops, there we go. Seller's market are crazy times. So, let's start off with basically what are our ground rules. Our ground rules come through ADRE. Of course, we have to follow the commissioner's rules. And their take on offers, basically all offers for listing agent side, is you must disclose other offers, the existence, the terms, and the conditions. That's what they want. That's what they put in their ready form, if you ever read the ready form. And this one I always like to point out when we're talking about when we guys go through my brokered contract class. On the buy side, make sure you memorize this line because 2829, if you come up to against the listing agent and says, I don't tell you anything about the offers, and you're like, well, really? When's the last time you read your ready form? Lines 2829 say seller or seller's reps may not treat the existence, terms, or conditions of other offers as confidential unless there is a confidential agreement between the parties. You must, give me, you got to tell me if you have the offers, you got to tell me what those terms are, and you got to tell me what the conditions are. Unfortunately, terms and conditions, it's very vague. Does that include price? Nah, it could. Does that include when they close? Should. How quickly they close? That's a good a term or condition. What about their financing? They should tell you that. Is it cash? Is it conventional? You can just probe them for all these kind of information. This one they have to tell you because ADRE tells them they have to tell you. For the next round rules, let's see. ADR's requirement to all parties. So what is their requirement to us on the buy side, say? So all agents you need to give to the other side reasonable skill and care and disclose all material adverse facts. What do you mean? Well, it's material or adverse, and we'll think seller disclosure. Those are all the things that they have to disclose, and you have to disclose to the other side whenever you find them out. So if you're in the middle of it, even during the transaction, if you're in the middle of the transaction, all of a sudden they find bed bugs and you're under contract, you have to immediately disclose. You have to let the other side know because that's a material fact that affects the price and eventual close of that property. Reasonable skill and care, that's basically what you expect from any competent person in the industry that has their license. They need to know their car load. They need to be able to do their job. Reasonable skill and care is, be professional, basically. Those are our ground rules. Sorry?
So what if we find the bed bugs after? So I'm the seller or seller's agent. We find the bed bug after the inspection period. So I tell the buyer and buyer's agent that we found bed bugs, but also we're past the inspection period. So you can't do anything about it, right? Or what?
You still can. Everything's negotiable at any point during the contract. So if you're the seller, you have to disclose it and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we just discovered these bed bugs." Of course, the buyer's going to freak. They may want to cancel, but they can't. What you can do is negotiate. You can renegotiate price. You can renegotiate terms. You can say, hey, we'll give you 2 more weeks to deal with the bed bugs. We're not closing until it's dealt with. You can say, sorry, if we have to deal with these bed bugs, we want $2,000 off that price because we know, or get a better thing to do. Obviously, we get a bed bug quote, tell them, hey, we're knocking the price off by this much.
Right. I guess I found that surprising because what if instead of it's after the inspection period and then we don't find bed bugs, instead a water pipe breaks, floods everywhere.
Yep.
Now, the same situation, my buyer's still stuck in this, or?
Correct. But the sellers have insurance. The sellers shouldn't cover those costs, and they have to fix the property. You can mutually agree to cancel, but you have to sign the contract that says, yes, I will cancel. And you're outside your due diligence. You've inspected the property. What happens to it between that point and closing those are adverse things that happen after the fact. And it's still new data. It's still things that have changed that have, adversely affected the consideration to be paid by either party. And at that point, you have to decide and renegotiate.
I guess I thought that I was going to be able to get my buyer out of that for sure if that would happen. But if the owner purpose,
Well,
what if,
let's say if there's a fire and it destroys the home, that adversely obviously affected the value of that home. They're not paying that price for that home that's burnt to the ground. You can still close, or you can agree to cancel, or they can give you a huge price reduction. There's many ways you can spin it, but automatic cancellation, no.
right? Okay.
You're still purchasing that property. Even if the person dies, you can still move forward in some certain circumstances and closing the property.
Right. That's good to know.
Yep. Any questions on that one? Other questions?
So yeah, I guess I did going back to. So I definitely did not know. This is the first time I ever heard that if I ask a seller if I have a buyer and I ask the seller's agent if there are any other offers on the property.
Yes.
This is the first time I've ever heard that the person has to tell me at least something. I thought they could just state.
They have to tell you there's existence offers, and they have to tell you terms and conditions.
Right. Yeah, that's just the first time I ever heard about that. That's interesting.
I thought we covered that on a contract thing, but maybe not. We'll get to this other side of that when I come back to when I'm further on. Let's go on the next one. All right. First thing from the buyer side, we always want to talk to the listing agent. Why is because we already know they have the upper hand. We need to find out as much as possible about what that seller wants and what they need for us to get our client's offer accepted. And to do that, you got to probe for info. Is there things outside of price that the seller is looking for? Maybe they want a flexible close. Maybe they haven't found that new house yet. Maybe they want a pre-possession or post-possession, excuse me. Prefer not to ever do that, but if that's necessity to getting the deal closed, we can talk about it. Showing traffic, how many offers they have, like we talked about before, details about the offer. Maybe they have fear of transaction falling out. If it's an FHA financed offer, maybe we can do conventional. Maybe they can offer do cash, they can do a bridge loan. Lots of options, lots of things. Until we understand what the seller is looking for, you can't really know how to deal with that. Like earnest money. Some people are like, well, 1% is typical. Hey, what if we gave you 10? 10%. Wow, that shows he's serious. Next thing on strategies. Who goes first? This is kind of the thing that's been debated around and around and around forever about negotiating. This is kind of some break bullet points about when you should go first and how you should go first. And if you're on the stronger position, you know where you should be anchored around, or where that baseline or where the negotiation should be. Going first gives you this competitive advantage. If you're in an area where you don't know much about the offer, don't know much about the neighborhood, maybe it's an area that you're not familiar with, maybe going first isn't the best thing. What I mean by going first is going first in the price. When you call that seller and say, hey, we are, if you know the market better than they do, you can start trying to beat them up on comps. You can talk about the neighborhood. You can talk about what this house doesn't have the other houses do. As a seller, taking that into account, into the pricing, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing about who goes first is also when you're going into a seller situation, even from the seller side, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Emotion in negotiation, good and bad. There's ways to play it. There's ways to play it badly. Badly is screaming and yelling at each other. That doesn't get anywhere during a negotiation. That can actually halt negotiations. The dog ones, I love that one about lousy poker players because it's a little too obvious about got a good hand. But during negotiations, the best thing you can do, practice your poker faces. If for the seller side, we'll get into that one a little later, but on the buy side, trying to tamp down your buyer's enthusiasm. Worst thing can have happen is going into the house and they're like screaming and yelling like, oh my God, I love this place. It's my dream home. It's like, oh my God, we're going to get raped in the negotiations now. So, oops, sorry. Got to keep this clean for the kids. We are going to get beat up well from the negotiations now. Other things you can show is enthusiasm. We'll show you a little bit interesting way of using enthusiasm for your buyer side, how to negotiate it, how to use it to your best advantage. Bracing the hard stuff. So when Cameron brought up the bed bugs, this is where the hard stuff happens. This is where something comes up that can kill your deal, and you, being an amazing negotiator that you are, you find a solution that makes everybody happy and keeps that thing moving forward. Also, great, um, great mentor of my mind told me one time, if you don't feel a little uncomfortable about making the offer, you're probably not asking for enough. I love that one because usually when I'm going into an offer and my buyer's like, oh my gosh, let's lower this low an offer. And I'm like, oh, I know this isn't going to go through, but I know it's got to be a little uncomfortable. And we'll hopefully make it work out and deal. But then after they find out several deals later, we're in the seller's market. Those kind of tactics just aren't flying right now on the buy side. Sell side, you can do those all day, all long. He who has the most data wins. So the more information you can get on yourself or the person on the other side. Going into the home, obviously, people doing the sight unseen offers, I think, are nuts. There's 100 things that you can pick up on from the seller's home, especially if they're still living in the home. There's stuff that they're in there, how far along they are in the packing, if they've just kind of given up. I showed you guys that one flip property where they had the photographer out and they just didn't even clean the house, much less make the bed. You knew they'd given up or something major had happened in their life. And you can take all those things into a negotiation table on your side. An interesting thing about it, and going back to the disclosure things, one offer I did, I had some buyers that wasn't a super crazy seller's market like it is now, but it was still more leaning towards the sellers. They loved the house. They really wanted the house. And I did a little research on my opponent, the listing side, and I've noticed he was old school. He had one of those seller license numbers like way down the low fives. So I knew he'd been in the market or the industry forever. And he had an office not too far away from where I was at. So I was like, oh, I'll just drop in, do old school on him. I'll deliver it in person, give it to him, and print it out, purchase offer, and try and probe him for information, see what I can do to get my buyer's offer accepted. I go in there thinking I'm all smart. I'm going to put one over on this guy, and immediately go in there, shake hands, very cordial, starts talking about the property, the offer we're giving him. You have anything on the desk? And he's like, no, unfortunately, my fiduciary duties do not allow me to disclose that. And so I start probing about pricing and the market, telling him about, it seems like it's a little high. And he comes right back to the same old line. My fiduciary duties preclude me from answering that question. He was like a broken record. Everything I tried, same line. I love it because I remember it, obviously, still to this day. There's a good thing and a bad thing about that. One thing is that, of course, I got frustrated with it and just kind of like got to the point where I pulled the, what's that detective that goes around stumbling around like he's lost and doesn't know where he's at half the time, saying, can you help me out? But basically pulled one of those on him. I was like, well, can you help me out here? I mean, obviously the more experienced one here. What am I not asking, or what am I doing wrong? Why can't you answer my questions? And he kind of took pity on me, and he's like, well, you're asking all the right questions. I just can't answer them because my fiduciary duty to my client, I cannot answer. I was just like, oh my gosh. You're my idol now. So walked out of there a little frustrated, but we still got the house. But wow, that was an uphill battle. If data doesn't help you out, try anchoring. Anchoring is the process where you try and, sorry, should have muted that. Process of getting people to think around your numbers where you want to be. If you're on the sell side, you want the higher number to be at the high side, obviously, on the low end. If you're the buyer, this is what investors like to call lowballing. The thing they found out in cognitive biasing is that if you start looking at, like, say, this mathematic problem, 8 times 7, that makes about 56, times by 6. We're already in the 300s. So they guesstimated really high number. It's going to be around the 2000s because they started out in the high end. Flip it around, the exact same math problem. You say, oh, 1 times 2, that's 2 times 3 is 6. Wow, this is going to be a really low number if I multiply it all out to 8. And they all guessed around 500. Just by the starting out of where they were at, getting those numbers down to the low end, they kind of concluded, well, I'm anchored, and my estimate's going to be, it's going to be on the low end. This is kind of why you're trying to shift people's thinking and try and get them anchoring around the number that you want them to be at. And you do that by obviously putting in data and figures out there that makes it look like where we want to be is, oops. Oh, come on. Seriously? Ah, there we go. Sorry about that. So, I really wanted to put in like 200 slides in this thing, but I kind of narrowed it down to 12. But this one's a really great summary. I don't know if anybody's seen Intolerable Cruelty. Great movie. Hopefully you guys can hear this. Can you guys hear it?
No.
Seriously?
Yeah, I can't hear.
I recorded it yesterday and everything was working. I swear. Sorry. Pause. We're going to try one thing really quickly here. All right, 1, 2, 3, go.
Be tempted to chime in, but remember that you're in an
Can you guys hear that?
state.
Yes.
Yay!
Okay. Ready. Ready, Bender. This is Rex Roth, and you are the lovely Marilyn.
Please, Miss Rexroth. And you must be Mr. Massey.
Please, Miles. Sit down. Oh, Freddie.
Whoa. Sorry about that.
My client is prepared to entertain an app. Let's hear it. Well, at this point, my client is still prepared to...
Don't try to bait me, Miles. No, if you have a proposal to make, let's hear it. Well,
Not to worry, Mrs. Rexroth. You're...
We're worried
I
about
was
it here.
sorry to hear about
Anyways.
the Goldberger Award.
Sorry about technical difficulties.
we did very well. We did very well.
Not to worry, Mrs. Rexroth. You're ably represented. I'm sure Freddie's just too modest to tell you he used to clerk for Clarence Thomas. Pastry? Going begging.
Don't try to bait me, Miles. No, if you have a proposal to make, let's hear it.
Well, at this point, my client is still prepared to consider reconciliation.
My client's ruled that out.
My client is prepared to entertain an amicable dissolution of the marriage without prejudice.
That's a fart in a stiff wind.
My client proposes a 30-day...
Probing and
cooling-off
probing.
period.
My client feels sufficiently dispassionate.
My client asks that you not initiate proceedings pending his setting certain affairs in order.
Oh, what's so goddamn funny?
Please, let me handle this. All right. So much for the icebreakers. What are you after, Freddie?
My client is prepared to settle for 50% of the marital assets.
Why only 50, Freddie? Why not 100? While we're dreaming, why not 150? Are you familiar with Kirshner?
Kirshner does not apply.
Bring this to trial. We'll see if Kirshner applies.
What's Kirshner?
Please, let me handle this.
Kirshner was in Kentucky.
Kirshner was in Kentucky?
Kirshner was in Kentucky.
All right, Freddie, forget Kirshner. What's your bottom line?
Primary residence, 30% of remaining assets.
What are you, nuts? Have you forgotten Kirshner? Freddie, it's a negotiation.
See you at the preliminary.
Freddie, we're all friends here. It's a negotiation. Hey, Freddie, fine. We'll eat the pastry. I thought that went well.
Does anybody know why I thought that went well?
Because the look.
Sorry, what?
Because the girl was looking back at him.
Nah. Well, no, not only that, but he actually probed and prodded. He tried to find his bottom line, and he got the other guy all riled up and emotional. Got him to leave. And then he knew he had him. So, back to my next problem. All right. So, unfortunately, it skipped a couple of my slides. I'll see if I can find them on the way back. We can talk about it from the buy and the sell side. But what I was going to do is say, well, what if you're on the winning side, and right now you're a seller? So, being on the sell side, complete opposite of everything what I just told you. For the sellers, let's see if I can go to my previous slide. Great. Anchoring. So on the sell side, same thing. You're just trying to get them on the high side of the number rather than the low side of the number. An interesting way that happened recently, we were, had a buyer, came in. He was offering 15% less on the list. I'm just like, wow, okay. He was talking directly to the buyer. If it was a buyer's agent, I would have done the same thing as he did in the movie. I would have spit out the water. I would have been like, what? Are you crazy? In this market, 15% off? Nobody's going to take that. Are you ridiculous? But no, as a buyer, I didn't want to get in his face about that, like, because some people get upset and angry if you start negotiating tactics like that. Just put on the poker face. I said, okay. Later contacted me later, said, oh yeah, about that offer on the house, would they take that 15% less? And I'm like, he kept probing and prodding. I kept pulling up like my the other guy, older gentleman that brought up, my fiduciary duties. I cannot disclose what my seller is looking for. Kept bringing it up. He started getting frustrated. So I was like, all right, I can't tell you because of my fiduciary duties, but this is what I can tell you. The market is what it is, and it's a very pro-seller market, even in its price range. And 15% will just not fly. Well, what do you mean? What will the sellers take? And I'm like, I can't tell you that either. But what I can tell you is we've had 2 other offers, and they're higher than this one, and they both were rejected. No counter, no nothing. So he's like, wow, okay. He went away, thought about it, got his buyer's agent involved. Buyer came in. It was slightly above list price. So anchoring him around the price where he should be starting rather than starting around where he wanted to start and trying to inch us up wasn't going to fly, especially in this market when you have the upper hand. You got to re-anchor them and bring them back up to reality, bring them up to the number that makes sense. Still same thing. On the seller side, we don't really, you have it easy because if you have 4 or 5 buyers to choose from, you have 4 or 5 buyers agents. Don't really need to get into their head, but you do need to know a little bit about each offer, what they're kind of looking for. The more you know about the buyer, what they're trying to achieve. Say they've been looking and they got shot down by 30 other offers. Obviously, that's some data you want to know because they're going to be really easy to negotiate with. You can ask for the moon, they'll probably give it to you. If you're on just one offer and that's the only offer you have, you can always say, yep. They come back at you and say, how many offers do you have? You say, well, currently I have nothing on the table. Why I use that wording is because I could have several verbal offers. Maybe some people are going to maybe make an offer later. He doesn't know. If you have no offers, no showings, you can say, well, we have just gotten in the market. But we do know from the data that we've from the neighborhood that we're probably looking at a multiple offer situation here shortly. Lots of things you can give up and say, but basically for the most part, if you're in the winning position, you want to say as little as possible, unless you need to redirect them, re-anchor them, etc. Hard stuff, there isn't really going to be much hard stuff because you're in the winning position. They're the ones that have to come up with the hard stuff, and so you can keep pushing and pushing. Say they want a 60-day close, your seller's like, hell no, push back. They want to give you almost no earnest money. Seller says, hell no, you push back. They want to come in with an FHA, DPA, and they want closing costs. You can laugh. That's just not going to happen. Motion on the selling side. This is the one that you have to be careful of. Sellers may get irritated with the multiple offers. They may get irritated with the showings. I know several of them are like, I don't want to do any more showings. I'm like, well, this is where we're at. We have 1 or 2 offers, but we have nothing on the table and nothing locked in. We've got to show. Other thing you want to get into is these buyers are being totally unreasonable, and et cetera. Well, my house is gorgeous. It's lovely. Those are the kind of the negotiations on the sell side that you got to deal with. It's not so much on the buyer side. The buyer side, the one you have to be wary of is always keep them in the loop, always keep them informed, and always keep communicating. Because the one thing that people are getting in trouble about is sellers never got my offer, the listing agent never presented it. That's the number 1 complaints that are in the that are coming into the commissioner. Seller going first when you have the upper hand, you have all the data, you have all the market on your side. You never go first. Let them talk. Little as possible, that you can say at the very beginning of the negotiations. And then, of course, the probing. Remember my buddy? My fiduciary duties preclude me from answering that question. Just memorize that line because they're going to poke, they're going to prod, because they need that info to help their buyer client out. Anything they can get out of you is something. Be resistant. Tell them nothing. There was one other slide that didn't come up in here, and that was ZOPA. So basically, I can't even illustrate with my hands, but basically, here's the sellers, their best and worst case scenarios. Here's the buyers. ZOPA is where they meet in the middle. ZOPA is a zone of possibility. So you want to, obviously, if we're representing the sellers, we want the highest price possible, least amount of conditions, contingencies, etc. Buyers, of course, the complete opposite. You're always on this tugging and tolling back and forth, back and forth. The Zopo is kind of where can we meet in the middle? It can be on the higher end, it could be on the lower end, but somewhere in between where the worst case of each party. And then ADR's take, of course, for on the sell side, first thing that we do is when we go in my contract writing class for the listing side, we put in a confidentiality agreement into the listing contract. And why we do that is that gives your seller the option at that point. Do they want to tell everybody about these things? Do they want to tell them even terms and conditions? Most likely don't. Most of them don't. Do they want to tell them about the existence of those offers? I always say it's a good thing because the more offers you have, everybody likes having what's in demand. So they'll jump in on those. So telling them there's existence of other offers or even the hint of for future offers like nothing on my desk, those can drive more offers. It can backfire. There are investors out there that don't want to get into bidding wars. There's people out there that don't want to get into bidding wars. But if we're representing the seller, we don't care about those people. Who we care about is the people that are going to get emotional and are going to drive bidding wars. Where that backfires on you, of course, is we only have one offer and you have one other potential offer and they freak out and leave. So, let's see, where was I at with the seller sign? My slides I won't show. Come on. No, stop. Oh, wow, killed half my slides. All right, well, skip right down to my final thought then, I guess. Negotiation is like poker. I used to hate poker when I was younger, early 20s. I hated it because, well, when you go to play blackjack, everybody's friendly. Even the dealer wants you to win. And in poker, everybody's adversarial, and they're all out to get each other. And the worst part was when I was a young kid, the old man always took all my money. I always say the old guys would take it. As I grew up and grew old and got matured and got into more and more investing, I started loving poker. It was like, holy crap, this is just like doing a deal. It changes constantly. You have to make tactical decisions based on new data constantly that come into during the process, from the very beginning all the way to the very end. New things all keep coming up, and you have to reevaluate and reassess. And of course, you have more fun when you're winning, beating your opponent, taking him out. But also on the flip side of that is, as they say in poker, if you go into the room, you can't spot the sucker, then you probably know who it is. So can't talk today. The biggest thing I can tell you to get better at negotiating is just doing more of it and finding out more. The more you know, the more you learn about negotiating, the better you'll become. So, sorry for the crazy technical difficulties and bad slides, but any questions on any of that?
Yes, I also love poker. The after poker.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said I love poker too. We should set up the after poker.
Now you're talking. There we go. All right. Anything that holding you guys up? The things that we can do to help you with your business? Make your lives easier? All right, I'm going to stop the recording.